2050, and we are delighted to focus today. So we're delighted on the company-driven sustainability innovation angle. As I think a number of you are aware, the wider ambitions of the project are to look at ways in which users, innovators, and entrepreneurs are being increasingly included into innovation ecosystems, drivers of new solutions, products, and services that support more sustainable lifestyles in Europe in the decades to come. So in today's webinar, we're going to focus primarily on work that's being led by Aalto University in Finland under the guidance of Professor Minna Halma, and in particular, how large companies are increasingly rethinking their approaches to innovation system design and the inclusion of users, innovators, and entrepreneurs, new models of innovation for sustainable services, products, and solutions. And so what I would like to do just for the first 5 minutes of this afternoon's webinar is to give a little introduction and background context to the project as a whole. We'll pass the microphone over to Minna and colleagues Angelina Korsunova and Jennifer Goodman in Helsinki to through some of their emerging insights and findings, and have a block of 15 to 20 minutes, I would expect, towards the back end of the webinar, where anybody is free to table questions or comments or ask for some clarification about some of the material that Minna and her team will be presenting. Very quick word on the protocol. During the main presentation, we will mute everybody's microphones so that the presentation can be delivered in one block. You have a couple of options for tabling any questions or comments. The first is to enter a remark or a question into the chat box on the lower right-hand side of your screen. And alternatively, when presentations have finished, we will open up everybody's microphones and simply ask or maybe directly into the online forum. We can go to the next slide, please. So, very quick recap of sustainable lifestyles in the European policy context. And I think for anyone actively involved in sustainability research in the last few years, and particularly EU funding, well, this has become a very significant part of European Union considerations about how to effect transitions to a more sustainable society and economy in Europe in the years to come. And three overarching objectives, which were defined back in 2010 and 2011, following it's how does the European Union promote smart, sustainable, inclusive growth in the single market in the years to come? How do we manage an aging population while also encouraging the reduction of current levels of energy, transport, and resource use, both systems level and for individual consumers? And how do we get our heads around alternative consumption and production systems will support a transition to a low-carbon economy by 2050? Now, this backdrop, the EU funded a social platform in 2011 and 2012 called 2050, which was led by the Center for Sustainable Consumption and Production in Wuppertal in Germany. And this was a process of bringing together hundreds of stakeholders and experts from around Europe to tease out possible scenarios, governance system around different scenarios, where to achieve a fixed target of per resource consumption in Europe, which they find as 8,000 kilograms per year. And so the scenarios generated by Spread 2050 were actually what underpinned DG Research's interest in convening a high-level research project to look into the feasibility, the obstacles, and the prospects for making these scenarios a reality. Next, Marco. So then in 2012, the European Commission launched a call for major proposals for 5 million in funding, so 4 different dimensions of the scenarios and the wider sustainable lifestyles domain in Europe. So they challenged the European research community to look at between economic, ecological, human and technological systems, and how the interactions between these were influencing consumer values and behavior and wider lifestyle choices from parts of Europe. The big question that they had was to really understand whether or not the transitions to sustainable lifestyles and green economy are feasible, and by extension, what would be the main barriers and obstacles that would need to be overcome in short to long term, and also what kind of opportunities this might create, both from a growth and competitiveness perspective, but also in terms of more inclusive, engaged European societies, and the promotion of entrepreneurship and business in the European single market. The question on the table was the new business models that might emerge to match natural resources and reduce consumption, overall quality of life indicators in Europe. And it's worth noting that this was before things such as circular economy were really on the table as European policy agendas. So even 4 years ago, these were important questions, but I think developments in the last year or two have started to move this agenda forward, and we begin to look at new economic models and systemic shifts, which will make this more of an attractive business reality for large companies as well as small. And then, but not least, a major research question was, what kind of data can be gathered to actually indicate the impact of certain trends or innovations around sustainable lifestyles, and what that might add up to by the time we get to 2050. So next slide, please, Mark. So on this slide, you see the group of partners who came together in late 2012, early 2013, to create the EU-InnovatE proposal. Our scientific coordinator is the Technische Universität München School of Management, under the leadership of Professor Frank Martin Belt. But as you can see, it's really a pan-European group with research networks and platforms as are some of the leading universities and business schools in the sustainable business domain. Next, please. And so here's our key idea that we're very pleased to say resonated well with the European evaluators. They read our proposal. It's to look at what we believe is an emerging phenomenon, which are creative, innovative, and entrepreneurial roles of users and drivers of new sustainable products, services, and systems, which, taken together, may add up to something that we collectively refer to as Sustainable Lifestyles 2.0. Next, please. A simple representation of where we think this new phenomenon fits within perhaps a more classic model of consumerism and the role of users in innovation systems. See, the slant of the project has been very much about moving from the bottom left quadrant of passive and individual users involved in classic consumerism, as we term it, to more collaborative, innovative spaces, both within the context of large companies and their innovation systems, but empowered by new media and new technologies, working at community level, virtual and physical, where you actually become the collective co-producers of new solutions and products, as mentioned in the previous slide. Next slide, please. So this is a very quick snapshot of the design of the EU-InnovatE project. We've been looking at a number of different components, including the history of sustainable lifestyles in Europe and production consumption systems. We're looking very much into the future with scenarios and trend measurements in work packages 2 and 5. We're also looking into the policy landscape and where open policy making is starting to challenge some of the orthodox approaches, bringing citizens, users and entrepreneurs in better policy decision making. But the heart of the project is very much what you see in the middle, Work Package 3 and Work Package 4. This week we had a webinar with our colleagues in Munich about the increasing role of users and sustainable entrepreneurs in driving innovation. And today we're going to look at the large company dimension, sustainability innovation, integrating users. So next slide. With that, I'm delighted to hand the microphone over to our colleagues in Helsinki, Angelina and Jennifer, who are going to talk us through a little bit of the framing context of the work that they've been doing as their emerging findings and some headline insights. So over to you and colleagues in Helsinki.
Thank you. Slide. Thank you. We will be presenting the work from EU-InnovatE project, which is about how companies integrate users and other stakeholders into their collaborative innovation processes for sustainability. I will say a few words in the beginning, then my colleagues Angelina Korsunova and Jennifer Goodman will take over. Next slide, please. So, we are essentially going to speak about 3 different sets of things during this presentation. First, we will say a few words about why this is important. Secondly, we will go into what sustainability innovation means, and particularly collaborative sustainability innovation. And the bulk of the presentation will be around how companies, together with users and their other stakeholders, can produce sustainable innovations. And in order to address the first why, let me just take yet another perspective of what Simon was describing from the European perspective. I would like to take a world perspective, and we all know that the world, our globe, is ridden with environmental and social problems such as climate change or depletion of natural resources, poverty and economic and social inequality. We see refugee crisis putting Europe and other regions of the world into very difficult situations. And all these items and many more can easily give us a sense of hopelessness. But if you the other way around, you can actually take these challenges and problems in a different way as sources of innovation. Next slide, please. And this is actually the angle that we have been taking throughout this project, how to address wicked, difficult sustainability problems with the help of innovation and entrepreneurship. And this is also what we want to discuss and exemplify today with our learnings from the sustainable innovation that companies do together with their both users as well as the other stakeholder groups. Now I'd like to hand over to my colleague Angelina Korsunova, who will tell you a bit more in concrete terms of what this means and what we studied. Lina, welcome.
Hello. So next slide, please. Start out looking for innovations that established companies across Europe have been developing recently, where sustainable or sustainability-oriented products or services have been involved. And for innovations where also users were part of the development process. We ended up with a pool of companies of almost 130 companies across different industries and across different European countries. From these examples, we chose 18 cases that were most interesting and most illustrative of the cooperation during the innovation process for sustainability-oriented products and services. So in short, we have 18 cases, established companies. Innovation process always involved end users, but also many other stakeholders, and across the 4 domains: energy, mobility, living, and food. And I now pass to my colleague Jennifer, and we are going to give quick examples of the companies that we studied.
Hi, so just to give you an illustration of what we've been exploring, one of our case studies is Valib. This is a cycle share system that was set up in Paris and was a collaboration between the outdoor furniture and advertising company JCDecaux and also the city of Paris. A wide range of different stakeholders, so the public authority was very involved. They set up an end user committee that combined different stakeholders. So members of the local community as well as member of the city council and of the company. And this was a place where different issues related to the project could be discussed. The idea was to set up a zero carbon cycle share system. So this is part of the mobility and transportation domain. The idea of halving the number of private vehicles used in the city of Paris by 2020.
An example that we have is from an international construction company called Skanska. So this example comes from the living domain. This company, together with IKEA, decided to make affordable and eco-efficient housing a reality for low-income households. In order to make the affordable housing, the secret was making very efficient layouts and interior planning. And as part of the innovation process, it was important to involve the end users very early on in the process so that they could comment the layouts of the apartments to make this a scalable innovation and later on to benefit from the economies of scale. Other stakeholders that were involved in the innovation process were, for example, the local municipality, which helped to find locations that had easy access to public transportation. And also other business partners, such as the manufacturers of the construction materials, that came up with a solution to produce wood-based modules to make the construction much faster and to reduce the waste during the construction process.
Next slide, please. So across the 18 different case studies, our team of researchers analysed all of the information that we'd gained, and we come up with 4 broad findings, which we'll go into a little bit more detail in the next section. So firstly, we found that companies work with ordinary people, with users, with environmental and social groups, with academia and public sector organisations, as business partners that we might often expect. We also see that sustainability innovation calls for novel ideas or capabilities beyond the usual business partners. The first recipe is to work with a limited number of selected stakeholders, and really only large companies have enough resources to be able to do this. And finally, the most impactful sustainability-oriented innovation resulted from working with multiple company members as well in innovation with different stakeholders. So now we'll go on to look at those in a little bit more detail.
2 examples of companies doing innovation with multiple stakeholders involved in the process. So, for example, is E.ON, a large utility company in the UK. Their innovation was a smart control system for households that had photovoltaic panels installed in the houses. In order to be able to test the system, they decided to have a relatively large field trial. So they had to, first of all, locate the relevant households that had photovoltaic systems installed, and they had to install the smart meters inside houses as well as the control system for them. The idea was to be able to monitor the consumption of the household, but also generation of the energy, how much is being generated, how much the household is using, and to give the households a tool to control their own consumption. The system would also provide some forecast about the sunny days, so that the households would be able to monitor when it is most, it makes sense most to do energy consuming activities. So in order to proceed with this field trial, E.ON made a partnership with a local municipality, the town of Milton Keynes in the UK, and also they made a partnership with the National Energy Foundation, a local charity. This facilitated the integration process of the households. So the municipality was a key actor in enhancing the trust towards the utility company. And the National Energy Foundation also facilitated locating the relevant households. As an example that we have is Frostam, a German company that produces ready-made meals made from fish and other sea products. And from 2010, they also decided that all their ready-made meals will be free of any additives, free of colorants, free of taste enhancers. So the company also decided to move to the Eastern European markets and promote their offering there. But in the Eastern European markets, the main challenge was that the society was not ready to accept or to think of food in more sustainable terms. So what they did was they involved partners from academic institutions. So they had professors, for example, speak on TV about the importance of having or eating additive-free food, which is sourced from sustainable sources. They also made a partnership with the Mentorship Council and made internships available to students who were studying to be nutrition experts, so that they were getting public involved during different events at shopping centers, explaining how and why it is important to sustainably sourced food. Next slide.
So, as well as finding that often multiple stakeholders were included, we also found that the collaboration was happening beyond the usual business partners. So there was collaboration between suppliers and other usual business partners, but there was a really striking presence of what we would call secondary stakeholders. So, for example, civil society organizations, academia, and also public sector organizations. We've just two examples here which demonstrate this quite well. The first one is Rockwool, which is a Danish company that produces a type of material called stone wool. In discussion a civil society organization, the idea came up of using this material as insulation in refugee shelters rather than for just industrial purposes. It was also involved in helping to develop the products and develop the material, and also helped in collaborating with the NGOs and outreach work with refugee organizations. NGOs were also involved here in helping to test the shelters and trialing them and giving feedback on how they could be improved. The second is Ecoveritas, which is a Spanish supermarket chain focused on healthy eating and organic food. And they wanted to solve the problem of food wastage, which had been pointed out to them by some of their customers. For example, at times of year when we have a supply of certain types products. Developed developed a new range of products that would use some of these foods that couldn't be kept. They worked with Fundación Alicia, which helped them develop recipes and helped them develop this new range of food products. They also worked with another organization, Group CIFO, which helped them to include workers with physical and mental disabilities in the factory, which then produced this product line. They used their end users and their customers in terms of getting feedback and helping them to develop the recipes and trial the product.
To summarize, we found that not only companies nowadays are doing operation engaging end users, but that also different types of stakeholders, not only primary stakeholders, but also secondary or one might say unobvious, unusual stakeholder partners are important and relevant in sustainability-oriented innovation. Strategies are effective for engaging the stakeholders in the innovation process. The first strategy is selective early collaboration. This basically means that the company picks only very few stakeholder partners and engages them very early in the processes. We found out from our cases that usually this kind of early engagement with a few partners leads to innovations that have higher sustainability impact. The second is not having much collaboration in the early stages, but rather having this late in the process, do fine-tuning with the end users or other stakeholders. So it's more like a verification strategy. This strategy helps in particular to increase the acceptability of the innovation in the market. And the strategy is a broad, committed collaboration, having a wide network of stakeholders, but final decisions are taken by the company alone. This strategy is most suitable for large companies that have very extensive resources, and only few companies are really able to follow this. Next. Middle implications based on these strategies are the strong stakeholders are important. What we saw in the cases was that the engagement of project managers in integration activities of the stakeholders was key to the success of the innovation. So project managers or other employees be present during integration activities such as workshops or focus groups, their role. Importance of fuzzy front end. So, like I said previously, engaging the stakeholders early on has an impact on developing innovations that have a higher sustainability outcome. And finally, for most companies, it actually makes sense to avoid too large stakeholder networks and rather concentrate on a few partnerships. Next.
So what we've been involved in very deeply is to explore the different activities and roles that the different stakeholders have taken in the innovation process. And we found kind of different groups of roles, proactive, reactive, and mixed. This definition is based on whether the initiative of the activity came from the stakeholder or from the company. So 3 proactive roles are really the stakeholder took the lead and had the initiative to start activity. And we found that stakeholders played roles as stimulators for the innovation, so offering calls for ideas or offering funding, which really triggered the innovation process. Also, stakeholders could be initiators of the idea, so they kind of inspired the innovation. And third, found the role of an impact extender, where the innovation could actually be promoted and extended into other areas of sustainable lifestyle. So, for example, from mobility into lifestyle issues such as energy saving or using organic products or organic food. Then the more reactive role. So this is where the company really reached out to look for stakeholders to help them. One of these was the concept refiner, and we found that there was a really strong role for end users here as a concept refiner, offering feedback on the different products and services which have been developed. Data role was often played secondary stakeholders, and this is where public authorities and civil society organizations were able to add credibility and trust to the development of the innovation. And thirdly, an educator role, which prepared potential customers and civil society more broadly about changes in lifestyles and sustainability. There are which show both proactive and reactive examples. One broke a mediator role, and here stakeholders really help to facilitate and enable collaboration between multiple partners. A context enabler. Again, this was played quite often by public authorities and helped with regulation and policies to help the innovation be more successful. Next slide. Thanks. Within the organization itself, our research showed a certain number of organizational barriers and also organizational enablers, which help the organization to innovate with users and with other stakeholders. Some of the barriers discovered was this idea of organizational fragmentation, where it's commonplace to outsource some different functions. Also found communication barriers between different functional areas of the company acted as a barrier to integrating user innovation. Integration issues is quite linked with skepticism here. The idea that the idea of the innovation was not invented here, it came from outside, and so this was also a challenge in many cases for companies. There was assessing user insights, assessing end users themselves, and then keeping stakeholders motivated. This is really a challenge in the connection between the ideas that were coming from customers and from users, and from being able to actually distill those ideas and insights and continue to build on them over time. In terms of managing the knowledge inflow of different insights, and especially secrecy issues related to particularly technical innovations, whereby the company may not have wanted or been able to give particular information on some of their technical processes. To identify a number of organizational enablers. One very important one here was top management support. So there are examples where right from the top of the company there was a lot of support to develop the sustainability innovation. Also to have support from different stakeholders, that independent departments with cross-functional teams either existed or were set up during the process, and this very much helped the sustainability-oriented innovation process. Government support was also an enabler in the process, integration into the research project of the different stakeholders and ideas. Culture was an important influencing factor, and an attitude of trial and error, and a culture where mistakes were possible was found to really support the innovation process. Sufficiency needed, and also a certain autonomy of innovation teams to be able to work on the innovation and to develop the ideas. So this really offers opportunities and risks. Opportunities were seen as a faster time to market, lower costs, and also technology adoption, and some of the risks. So loss of know-how, again, if there's particular technological know-how that they felt might be lost. Another risk is the increased complexity with so many different stakeholders collaborating, and the demotivation of employees with the feeling that this idea is coming more from outside than within. And the next slide, please. Two examples which really put together some of the findings that we've been talking about here. The development of the BMW, the first mass-produced electric vehicle by BMW, and also Verbund, which developed a network of charging stations for e-vehicles and related services via mobile apps. So we can both of these cases that there was really direct top management support, which was a key success factor for both of these projects. In the case, there was a cross-functional team which existed from the start of the project. In Verbund, this was something that evolved throughout the process. We also have a lot of multi-stakeholder involvement. So for BMW, universities were involved in some of the organizing of field trials and also for developing some of the related research. Energy suppliers were involved. There was an infrastructure partner, and also public authorities were involved when dealing with some of the regulatory issues. And then we can see multiple stakeholders. Research institutions were involved in the process. Equipment development, there was an infrastructure partner, dealers, and again we have the influence of the public authorities. And also the innovation culture played a role. BMW has a history of innovativeness and open innovation approaches, and Verbund has a very open company culture and a very strong personal commitment to the project. Next slide, please. How do we do this? From all of our research findings, we wanted to compile some of the key points for companies and how to go about this sustainability-oriented innovation. So some of our key guidelines. First of all, look out for policy initiatives or projects which are stimulated by public authorities. We found, as we mentioned before, an important role for public authorities in really stimulating projects with calls for projects or with public funding. With unusual stakeholders to help navigate the complex multi-stakeholder environment. Stakeholders played a really valuable broker mediator role, which enabled them to use their strengths to bring other stakeholders together. Give user audiences the chance to try out new concepts of products or services. The end user feedback in the innovation process was really valuable, especially to some of these new innovative products and services. Fourthly, get users involved in online ideas contests. And something that's becoming more and more popular both in research and in practice. A lot of work has been done on the technical functionality and the rewards to users for taking part in online idea contests. Our research and other factors were also important. So the leadership style that is portrayed through online idea contests, to have a clear vision, to explain goals, and to encourage end users or stakeholders to exceed expectations. It's also important to have a strong transformational leadership approach. As a climate, should it be competitive or collaborative? Well, emphasis on competition, that this may not be the most effective when it comes to solving some of the sustainability issues that the companies are dealing with. Next point, civil society organizations, academia and public authorities to build credibility and trust. This was a really important role played by those stakeholders and to tie the public of new sustainability solutions. Next, policy is a given. The public authorities played this role of context enabler to really help create a regulatory friendly environment and support the innovations through infrastructure. Next point. Ability specialists can extend the impact of new innovations to create more holistic solutions. So we found that, especially with this role of impact extender, that stakeholders were involved who could spread the impact, perhaps from environmental impact to a social as well, as in the case of EcoVadis. Next slide, please.
To summarize our presentation, what were we studying? Issues of products and services that are tackling sustainability challenges that are systemic and urgent and should be responded to with innovations. How can companies do that? Well, we looked at, they worked with end users, just ordinary people, special interest groups, academic institutions, and with public sector organizations. Problems are systemic. So one single company has the capabilities of solving such systemic problems. That's why the findings point that the best recipe companies is to work with a limited number of selected stakeholders. Only large companies have resources to engage with many stakeholders at the same time. Impactful sustainability-oriented innovations resulted from involving multiple company members closely in the innovation and in the integration process of the stakeholders. Thank you, and I guess we'll move on to the Q&A session.
A great deal of thanks, and Stu, that was a wonderful presentation, guys. Thank you ever so much for taking the time to prepare these thought sites to share with us. I'm not going to dominate the forum here, so I'm going to turn it over immediately to all of our colleagues who've joined online. We're going to unmute everybody's microphones in the hope that doesn't create an enormous amount of echo or feedback or background noise. If you have a question for Minna, Angelina, and Jennifer, please feel free just to ask. Okay, so we open the floor to those present, and please feel free to share your questions or comments.
Okay, I'm Rob Wetzel from the Netherlands. Do you hear me?
Yes, Rob.
Okay, thanks. What's triggering me is, maybe I understand it wrong, but the focus is dominated on product and services. And I think the shift we are making, also from the business point of view, is what do we do as a business and as a corporation by bringing solutions of bigger societal problems. And that brings also in view the aspect of the multiple value generations. So as a focal point for the stakeholder involvement. In what way was the focus of this project? Was it in the, as mentioned, primarily on product and services, or also the bigger societal problems and solutions generation the focal point?
Okay, thank you. This is a good question. The focus of the project was indeed product, services, and new business models of companies. But our special addition to the usual product, services, and business models innovation was a collaboration that companies are having during their innovation processes with different stakeholders from the society, including users. So in a way, if you think of the big societal problems like climate change or poverty or refugee crisis and that kind of huge problems, what we are saying here is that these problems need multiple solutions, and one of those multiple solutions can be provided by the sustainability innovation from companies. In addition to by companies, we are pointing to the direction that these innovations can actually better be created with stakeholders than by companies alone. Does this sufficiently answer the question, or would you like to have more clarification?
Thank you for your answer. I think that is very clear. My interest in practice is how you can involve stakeholders on several ways, and that way your stakeholder roles were very interesting. But also see is but when you bring stakeholders together and you are asking what they really value, that the fields of the collaboration with stakeholders can grow, bring in a better room for solutions. So I've seen that in your research, so that the starting point was maybe the interest of the company, but by stakeholder involvement, that the focus and also the focus of the which solution should be generated, that was changing by the involvement of the stakeholders.
And I add a little bit to that. What we actually saw in some of the processes, what was mentioned by Jennifer and Angelina during the presentation, was that in a few cases it was actually stakeholders that were proactively initiating the innovation process. So they, if I exaggerate to make a point, stakeholders used companies in order to promote their own ideas, which I think is also interesting, because they're very used to thinking that if companies do something, it's something that they initiate themselves, particularly if it's about innovation. But it's very worthwhile observation that if there are active stakeholders who have innovative ideas and who are capable of taking the initiative, they can actually take those ideas to companies and be the initiators.
Yeah. Yes. Thank. That's the way I was looking for. Thank you.
So very much for the question, Rob. I think just one other comment on that is also go back and have a look at the spread 2050 scenarios that actually sort of underpinned the European Commission's decision to put money into this as an area of research. Because it's very much about long-term transitions as a response to the big societal challenges that we face today. Right? It's a recognition that we can't rely on perhaps late 20th century models of company-led innovation to provide the necessary acceleration for the change in the way that current systems like energy, mobility, transport, or food function. And that actually we need to take a wider view on where the emerging solutions and products and services will come from. And that's from a far wider spectrum of stakeholders than has been previously accepted and emphasized. I see that Miguel Gais has his hand up. So would you like to add a question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you to the presentation. It was great. I work with the Shuffling Institute in general, work a bit with small and medium enterprises and the trade agenda. I saw that throughout the presentation you mentioned how it was the importance of availability of resources, like that large enterprises were in a better position to kind of drive forward these ideas of sustainable innovation. Is there any lessons, or are there any kind of things that you can transfer when you think in terms of this larger systemic change towards sustainability when it comes down to small and medium enterprises, or that can be transferred in this kind of stakeholder engagement? That's my question.
Okay, thank you. If I and my colleagues can continue with answer, we have these sizes of companies in the sample. None of them were micro or small. Some were you could consider medium-sized, some were very large. And indeed, as you heard in the presentation, what we could see as the difference been the stakeholder involvement by these different sizes of companies, whether really large versus the medium-sized and kind of, medium-large companies, was that the really large ones had sufficient resources in mobilizing several stakeholder groups, which they create in their innovation processes. The companies who were in the medium-sized end of our sample were having to focus a bit more in terms of which stakeholders they involved. So this variation that we saw here, and if I speculate a bit in trying to, draw lessons towards smaller and medium-sized companies, my educated guess would be that for them, the focus on the very key stakeholders who can help them in the process is very critical. And now I'm partly also drawing on some other findings in this project, which is regarding smaller companies, and that, as well as some articles that I've recently read, research articles, is pointing to the direction that smaller companies and starting companies could make great use of social movements or of non-governmental organizations or civil society organizations to help innovation processes in a variety of in drawing funding or in trying to lobby for such institutional change, which makes the societal space or the market for the innovation more easily possible, and other such things. So if I understood the question correctly, this would be my response, but maybe Lina or Jen, you might have some other points to add.
I'll add that from our cases, we could see, depending on what kind of resources are lacking from the companies, but cooperation in particular with academic institutions in such cases is very fruitful. For example, we didn't take this case here, but we had a case looking at demand-responsive transportation, where the academic institution was providing an opportunity for testing the transportation solution with free users, university staff and students. So this was a very freely and easy for a company to start with testing. In other cases, NGOs were mediating the involvement of users, for example, in a large music festival, where you could perform a really large-scale testing, conditions very close to real. So whether the company is lacking the final resources, or maybe resources in terms of skilled people, stakeholders can help providing these resources.
To reiterate the point that we found that there was this important stimulator role for public authorities who offered opportunities for funding for a number of projects. So that's also another way that companies with more limited resources could take this opportunity.
So thank you for the question. I think, again, just one quick comment on top of the responses from our colleagues in Helsinki. The other substantive blocks within the EU-InnovatE project is really to look at the processes and the context of user innovators and citizens becoming more actively involved in entrepreneurship and enterprise creation around new kinds of sustainable living solutions. Those are clearly being developed in the context of local communities, or even possibly at the regional level. But there are a number of other outputs, including last week's webinar, which looked at some of the dynamics around that. We have an event with European policymakers later this week, where we're going to be testing some recommendations and ideas with them about building up more capacity for entrepreneurs and SMEs, more favourable conditions for them to take environmental and social issues at heart of their business model and organisational purpose. So it's also a case of watch this space until we have final recommendations and analyses in the next few weeks, but another significant block of the project. One more question from Steve Kennedy in Rotterdam. At least I'm assuming that's where Steve is at the moment. So Steve, over to you.
Hello everyone, and thanks for your presentation. Just a quick question really on methods. So the first one being, what was your criteria for your case selection? And question, what data did you collect and analyze?
Good. If the EABs are able to take one of our first slides, I think the title was background. That would be helpful in giving the response. But the criteria was that the company included in the sample would have to be in one of the 4 domains: energy, mobility, living, and food. Would have to be a European company, and the innovation would have to address a social or environmental sustainability issue, and end users should be involved in the process. So these are the key criteria for studying a company, and we originally had a pool of about 150 companies in our larger sample, from which we then asked these 8 cases that we studied. And what kind of data we had? We interviewed members of the company, those that had been involved with the innovation process. It was usually from 2 to 4 people. We also always interviewed an end user stakeholder, and then depending on the case, we interviewed also those other stakeholders that had played a key part in the process. We also collected data from the web and from elsewhere in order to triangulate what we were getting as from the companies and from the stakeholder use. And for one part of our study where we wanted to see what kind of processes lead to more impactful, sustainable, in the sense of sustainable development, more impactful innovations, we also used experts from the fields of energy, mobility, and living and food to assess the sustainability impact of the innovation. It was sufficiently helpful.
So your innovations, the one you selected, they had to have entered the marketplace. They had to enter the economic system already, and they had to have been launched within the last few years, or did it matter when they launched into the marketplace?
All of these companies were established companies, and in terms of, so they had been in the marketplace for a number of years before start of the study. But in terms of the innovations, part of them were already commercialized, meaning that they were real innovations in the sense of innovation definition. But part of these innovations were in a stage where all pilots had been brought to the market, so the final version of the innovation wasn't there yet necessarily for a couple of these innovations that we studied.
And you found there was about 150 or so of these cases. How did it down from 150 to 18?
actually the 150 in a variety of ways, where like two shallow sustainability results, or the end user was too minimal, and so on and so forth. So we were trying to pick up cases which up to the criteria of sustainability impact of the innovation, or the intended sustainability impact of the innovation, as well as the depth of the user integration would have been as extensive as possible.
Okay, maybe I understand then the results a little bit better. Your cases were based on the innovations which actually had an end user sort of high involvement. So
yes, that's exactly correct. That end user involvement was one of our number one criteria, and actually the fact that in all of such processes, also other stakeholders than end user present, that was more of a surprising thing for us, which sort of suggests that as soon as companies are open toward end users in their sustainability innovation, it means that they tend to also open toward other stakeholders.
Okay, so the three strategies you found, that's appropriate for innovations with high end user involvement by virtue of the cases you selected, but there could be other strategies available to companies where there's not a high degree of end user involvement, then I guess.
Definitely, yes, that's very correct. If I'm still allowed, we are a few minutes beyond 4 o'clock, but reading the previous question about the resources of small and medium-sized companies for sustainability innovation, I would just like to mention that we had a Nordic study before this regarding that exact question of resources that SMEs need in order to come up with a sustainability innovation, and that in Business Strategy and the Environment in that journal in 2014, and that has a number of interesting findings, including that small enterprises with limited resources can come up with sustainable business model innovation more than with the technological innovation. So for technological innovation, more resources are needed than for a business model innovation. So for Miguel, who was interested in resources, I would suggest that he go into that article, because it's very enlightening on that very question.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you ever so much for the questions and answers. And I should just note that if any of the participants in the webinar this afternoon would like to carry on the conversation with Angelina and Jennifer bilaterally, then please hesitate just to send an email, and we'll make the necessary introductions by email so that you can get mentioned and source any of the articles or publications that the Aalto team and colleagues have produced in the course of the project or around the wide team. So, as Minna noted, a couple of minutes over time, which is in many ways a positive sign. We've had a good conversation. And I will close very quickly, really just by referencing two things. The first is that we really are now in the end game of the project. We wrap up on December the 31st. And so between now and this year, or maybe end of January at the latest, all public deliverables, the cases, videos, teaching notes, and the like, will be made available through the EU-InnovatE.com website. So we encourage you to follow the rest of our final phases there. Last but not least, you're all cordially invited to join us in Brussels on November the 22nd, when we have our final conference, grandiosely titled For Societal Impact. So we will not actually spend a huge amount of time getting into great detail about the research analyses and findings themselves, This is very much about building some momentum, a movement for sustainable entrepreneurship and citizen innovation in Europe. A very interactive, very engaged event. No fees, thanks to the European Commission, and so we cordially invite you to come and join us for what should be a very exciting day at the end of November. So I want to thank you ever so much for your time this afternoon, and as you see, the website here, which you can refer to in the weeks to come. But we're very grateful for you taking the time to join us, in particular to our colleagues in Alto for a wonderful presentation. I look forward to being in touch again with you all soon. Thank you. Goodbye for now.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye. Bye.
Bye.